Warning, this episode contains mild to heavy explicit spoilers. Listen at your own risk.
Reviews, discussions, and theories about films in horror, sci-fi, and genre. This is The Horror Deconstruction. Like, share, and subscribe to hear more.
Martin Scorsese needs no introduction. He needs no clickbait titles or errant tweets questioning his legitimacy. He needs an audience. At his advanced age, he is still gifted with a passion and energy for cinema that quote-unquote auteurs half of his age cannot muster. His film Killers of the Flower Moon, a nearly 3.5-hour film produced by Apple, sees the dramatic interpretation of the Osage County murders, a dark time in a seemingly endless pitch-black era of American history. To put the importance of the certain situation in this country's existence, out of the many slaughters of an indigenous race, most U.S. citizens are simply finding out about this at the premiere of this film. A watershed moment as nightmarish as the Tulsa Race Massacre, which also gets a mention in this tale. For those uninitiated, Killers of the Flower Moon centers its story around the Osage Indian murders of the first third of the 1900s, Indian being the coined term, not mine, for the Native Americans reacclimating to their own lands of Oklahoma. With a stellar cast led by Leo DiCaprio as Ernest Burkhart, a gullible but complicit villain, never getting his own hands dirty but nonetheless very filthy, his mouth stuck in a permanent cartoonish frown, 100 thoughts running behind his wild eyes. As always, DiCaprio, while being one of the most recognizable stars of the world, does fade into the character, only re-emerging as Leo whenever he gets his standard one scene that I get to scream at his co-star moment, which he handles well in this. Personally, I think his best yelling acting is in Revolution Road. The wonderfully stoic Lily Gladstone as Molly, his Native American wife, and seemingly endless punching bag to fate and its horrors. Gladstone's quiet and woefully real performance is the real human element of this film. Rounding out the trio is Robert De Niro as the architect of death, William King Hale, Ernest's uncle and Osage benefactor. De Niro is incredible in his role, a two-faced demon that speaks the tongue of the natives but spits poison out the other side of his mouth. Truly, to know that De Niro has wasted a lot of his talent on garbage is really astounding when seeing his work in this. Now for the film itself, I was unsure of how I felt as the credits rolled. It was a bit of a misery porn film. The only other movie that came to mind was 2019's The Painted Bird, directed by Václav Marhol, an incredibly dispiriting film about a young boy getting annihilated by life. There have been many articles about the film wherein actors of Native American descent complain that the film should have been told through the eyes of the indigenous peoples of the Americas, and while it's not my place to say if that's wrong or right, a little variety in how the story was told leans to me agreeing with the said complaint. Though that's possibly why Scorsese went the way he did with telling the story, by showing the other's interpretation of what doom was brought upon the people of the Osage. Yes, there are several beautiful moments where Native Americans take center stage of the film in an audience acclamation to their beliefs, traditions, and interpolations of Western life. I found these moments actually a breath of fresh air from the repetitive sequences of Hale hiring goons who then hire other goons to assassinate local Osage folks. We get from the very beginning that Hale and company are money-hungry monsters, and it becomes old real quick to see life pile tons of manure upon Molly and her family. That's not to say that this was boring. Scorsese knows how to command an audience's eye with cinematic storytelling, but this was one of the rare instances where I was like, yeah, they could have shaved off an hour of this. But it's Scorsese. I won't argue with what he knows about movies. We are really relegated to 3 locations. The town, Molly's home, and various desert landscape that looks alike. So this sweeping epic feels a little bit more scaled down for its runtime. I did feel that the movie began to perk up once the early iteration of the FBI squad led by an always excellent Jesse Plemons as Tom White. I wanted to see that version of the film. Maybe, of course, it would have been your typical Untouchable style film, but ironically the original film was a whodunit that had DiCaprio in Plemons' role until his interest in playing Ernest completely changed the narrative. I think in that sense, they've done away with the typical film, but I think it would have been narratively much more interesting. That said, it might have severely reduced Gladstone's work. It seems like a no-win situation in representation for Native Americans if the initial vision of the piece are Caucasians as protagonists solving the crimes against Native people, or the primary antagonist's focus causing the crimes. Being that I'm not white, I can't speak on the matter, but I feel the element of the indigenous culture was still represented in the film itself, but only to a certain percentage. At first off-putting, Brendan Fraser as a slimy defense lawyer might seem comic booky, but certainly is true to the time of sensational personalities grabbing the public's attention. It's a dark film that if you have the patience of seeing misery upon misery befall a group of people, then it's fine. It's simply a fine film. It has Scorsese's touch of importance, as nothing feels cheap or unimportant as many times we see it. The absolutely brilliant epilogue of the film, which concerns a radio dramatization giving us the answer to many of the film's key characters, works as a mirroring of the US's obsession with true crime broadcasts. As Scorsese himself says the final lines of the film, it feels like he is closing the curtain on a well-respected and genius run of auteur cinema. I give this film an 8 out of 10, asking an insurance company if you can kill kids. With that, this is the horror deconstruction.